Hello, everybody. David G here. David G, Model Citizen. Good to be back with you. Lots to talk about. We try to do an episode a week, and we may have to go up to 2 episodes a week because it's pretty hard to get some of my cohorts together because everybody's working and we're trying to get through this muck and mire of FDA and vaping and government and immigration and distractions. And so we're going to do the best we can. And tonight I'm again proud to be with my buddy, Kevin Crowley in Ohio. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Yes, sir. President accounted for.
And you have a lot to talk about tonight in the vaping news.
Absolutely.
Good. And also with us is our producer and our right hand, left hand, right leg, left nut, right nut. He is all that we have to offer you this information through the technical world of cyberspace, of which I know nothing about. So Steve Mathis, thank you so much for being with us. Are you there?
Yes. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Steve Mathis is our producer. He's the one who puts all this together for us. He's my Mr. Snerdley, if you know who he is.
Except you called Kevin that last week.
Well, yeah, you weren't here. Well, you were
Not
here.
on microphone, at least.
So now I have 2 Snerdleys. I have, but Kevin Crowley and you guys, and also Russ, who's out there marketing for us, and of course our sponsors, Pinnacle CBD, of which I have 5 flavors available for people who are trying to enhance the quality of their life while quitting smoking, because most smokers generally aren't healthy in other areas. So CBD is a wonderful, wonderful product that I use and have been using since last July. So Pinnacle kind of took us off the streets and allowed us to come up with some sort of a product that's going to hopefully, reach millions and millions of people, along with my e-liquid line brought to you by the David G Signature Series of VapesGoneWild. So, doing a little bit of business to help keep this funded so we can go do our job. And that is to educate and to inform and to enlighten and educate and entertain. That's what we have to do from time to time. So thanks for sticking with us. And if you're interested in getting the truth about vaping and the truth about wellness and the truth about the corruption on the side of big government, big tobacco, big pharmaceutical, the anti-tobacco movement, this is the station you want to listen to and the podcast you want to subscribe to, because we're going to take you on a bumpy ride, and you better buckle up because it's not going to be pretty. So with that being said, I would like to start off tonight by, telling you that Kevin will be with me every week, and he does have his blog, Vaping News. Could you refresh and remind the people exactly what you have and where they can find information when they're not listening to the David G Model Citizen podcast, Kevin?
Yes, sir. Vapinglinks.blog is now the address. It's been out for a little bit. Every week I do a wrap-up of both good and bad. And then on occasion I blog. This week I actually did 2, which I had time for. One was Ned Sharpless from the National Cancer Institute. And the other one was Dr. Gottlieb from the FDA being an idiot. So
again?
Still. He's
Okay.
It's something he likes to do. He had... He tweeted the 18th, actually. He said, no child should use any tobacco product. I agree with that. His caveat was, even if kids are using e-cigarettes instead of cigarettes, and that migration is in part accounts for decline of youth cigarette use, it's not an acceptable trade. I took that, and I was kind of PO'd about it. And then Dr. Farsalinos hit it, Clive Bates hit it, and a couple other people that were way more important than me hit it. So,
well, I mean, when Scott Gottlieb from the FDA has to play both ends, he's devil advocate. Let's face it. Okay,
yeah.
He's got so many people he has to please. I do think his intentions initially were pure when he took over the FDA, and we all thought that he was going to be the end all and be all to the vaping controversy, and he was going to nip it in the bud, and he was going to sidle up with the vaping industry. But unfortunately, and I'll just say it here tonight, let's get it out there, full disclosure, the vaping industry did a lot of their screwing up all by themselves. They didn't need the FDA to F it up.
Yeah.
They didn't need big government or Chuck Schumer or Dickie Durbin or Richard Blumenthal. Some of our people in our industry, as we've talked about many times, and hopefully that comes across on this podcast, because guys, I can feel bad for the smokers out there who are trying to quit, but everything that's happened in the last 6 to 7 months since I got some skin in the game, and that is the business side. I was never in the business side, as you know, Kevin,
Yep.
And Steve. I was never, didn't have any investment financially. All I had was my name, my reputation, doing activism and trying to get public relations to be a part of our fight, because nobody wanted to put any money into PR with paid press releases like our haters are doing. They're paying millions of dollars in paid press releases.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the industry, if bullshit was concrete, the vaping industry would be a highway. That's something I say quite often. It is true, because we've screwed it up ourselves. We have the people that should have been out of the business a long time ago, but yet they're still making liquid. It's not controlled the way it should be. It's not as clean as it should be, and everybody knows that. So, then they started talking about in Tennessee a few months ago in Rutherford County, when they raided 23 vape shops because of the CBD factor. And we found out that a couple of the CBD stores down there and the vape shops that were carrying it caused a bit of a stink, because some of your people who are just schmucks and a-holes and ass wipes, they were spiking it with a little bit more THC than they needed to, and the word got out. So, you're guilty by association, and that's what I hate about this industry. We don't have an umbrella organization that can, self-regulate ourselves. We got 5, 6, 7 different groups that are trying to do the same thing, but we're all singing from a different song sheet. So I think a lot of the stuff that we did, caused Gottlieb from the FDA to question a lot of the ethics of the vaping industry, which there are some that are questionable. There's no doubt about it.
And he should.
As he should. And Demetrius is talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
And, Bill Tarling talks about it from Vape Distortion up north, up in Canada. We got a lot of these shows that are on now through Smoke Free Radio, which is Demetrius Network. And, you got Mike Peterson, which he's very interested in, getting information out to the public. But, it's not enough that we have the truth behind us. Now you have to have people effing it up pretty good for us, and then we have to defend ourselves from that as well. So I don't want to give Gottlieb credit where credit isn't due. He's got a tough job, especially taking over for Mitch Zeller and all the other tobacco control schmucks that have been out there prior to him. So I'm not a fan. Don't get me wrong. No. I'm not a fan of what he's trying to do, but we have certainly laid some groundwork for him to question some of the things we've been doing in the past. And I saw it this weekend, guys, down in Chattanooga. Last week was the Vape Carnival. And I got to tell you, I've been to a lot of conventions, and I got to tell you, the Vape Carnival is all that's right with the conventions. They did everything right. We got, from what you asked me earlier, Kevin, 275, 300 people quit smoking there. They turned in their cigarettes. They got a free starter kit of a small device that was brought to you and paid for by Breeze. It was the Breeze 2 device with some liquids. I didn't put any of my liquids in there because even though it's for starter vapors, I wanted them to be able to have control of whatever they wanted. They were walking around the convention. They were finding flavors that they were sampling because it was legal, and they found what they wanted, because there's enough smokers out there who are trying to quit, like 41 million remaining in the United States. The numbers I know jump all over the place. Just like you said earlier, we're down to 14 or 15% of adults smoking, which I would argue it's higher than that. But there's nobody who really knows. It could be 27%. It could be 10. Nobody knows for sure, Kevin. And I don't know. You don't know. But from what we hear and what you are reporting in your vaping news, it's usually more of a go-to sort of a source to get information. So, but getting back to the Vape Carnival, it was fun. I was not in a good position. I had a blood clot in my leg, walking around with a cane and a compression stocking, so I looked like Caitlyn Jenner after she had her legs shaved. And I'm walking on stage doing my advocacy program.
I did not need that picture in my head.
Well, did you see the advocacy portion of it?
Yes.
Did you get to see it?
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, it was better than all the other ones put together. I mean, I've done some advocacy show programs and panel, and you get 30 people who are half listening, and they were just interested in having fun. They didn't really want to go there. But once we got warmed up with myself, and you had Sherwin Mina from North Carolina, we had Tristan from Legion. We had myself. We had Mark Anton, the new executive director of Safada,
Nice mix.
which we'll talk about a little bit because there's a effed up mess here in New Jersey. The effed up mess that we have in New Jersey, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it's just ruined my week. So remind me if I forget that we need to talk about New Jersey and talk about what's wrong with the industry. It's here in New Jersey, my home state. So be glad you live in Ohio.
Yes.
Okay. Steve, you live in Jersey with me.
About 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
Don't hold it against me. Okay. I told you this show is about telling the truth. So whoever's listening tonight, you're going to get some, crap thrown out there.
I've lived here my whole life. You've been around. You've at least traveled the country more than I have in my short life so far. I've got nothing against New Jersey, and if you stuck here, I guess that says something.
Well, I stuck here because I had kids and grandkids, and now I got grandkids growing up here. So I'm pretty well stuck here. I don't want to leave my family, but there's just so many things going on in this state here that I didn't even want to really get involved tonight because this is going to be a positive show with ranting and venting. But anyway, getting back to Gottlieb, I get sidetracked. I don't know if you noticed that or not lately, but I get distracted very quickly because I get passionate and then I get excited. Then I get nervous about the fact that I didn't finish what I was saying before. So you guys got to keep me on track, okay? And just don't feel bad if you have to say, hey, stupid, back up. You didn't finish your thought. Because as you know, with a podcast or with any talk radio or any show that's on, the hosts, the people who are bringing you information really do love what they do, as do I, and there's not one show I listen to regularly outside of my own because there's just so many distractions that we cannot agree to disagree. The immigration thing now with Trump and, separation of the children and family. I don't even want to go there, guys. Okay. Yeah. And if I have to spend time talking about a problem that I can't fix, then it's wasting my time and the listeners. But this is something that I can help control. I only worry about things I have a solution for.
Okay. And I've got to interrupt you then.
Yes.
If Dr. Gottlieb thinks that no child should use tobacco products and he wants to deny or deter adults from having it, why is he not going after your friends at Tobacco Free Kids or other tobacco control idiots? Because
they're all sleeping together, Kevin.
Oh, that's right.
They're all in bed together. This is something that they sit around and they strategize. And if you don't want to believe me, I'm not saying you, I'm talking about the general public, because that's who I'm talking to right now. Mm-hmm. I am not talking to vapors, because they already know the benefits of vaping. They already know how their life has been greatly improved. They are not anecdotes. I said that 2 years ago, and now we got this new cause and this new thing that I saw on social media where, you are not an anecdote. I've been saying that for 2 or 3 years. Yep. Just because, an anecdote is just something that, people look at and say, oh, it's a joke, because you're not real. You don't really matter.
We don't exist.
Okay. And you smokers who are now vapors, you're expendable. You're disposable. You're an anecdote. You're not real. You're just a joke. And I think when I started talking about that 2 years ago in Ohio last year, and then again this year, now they're starting to pick up on it. Why is everything that I've been saying for 5, 6, 8, 10 years now coming to pass? Not that I'm any better than anybody, Kevin or Steve. No. I know. I've been there. I've lived it. I've been through it. Everybody else is just now getting it into the game in the 5th inning.
You and Demetrius.
Me and Demetrius, and maybe a couple others who I have tremendous respect for. And I saw Demetrius in Chattanooga this past weekend, and he's the one that took me down to Chattanooga literally 4 years ago on his dime. He wanted me to come down there. Yeah. But that's when things were also very, very mismanaged. Even though Kevin Skipper from VCC did a good job with the conventions, they just got out of hand so quickly because they were throwing free shit out in bottles into the audience. And, it just became a big circus. And I think my point that I'm trying to make tonight in this podcast is that Chattanooga, the Vape Carnival with John May and Ronnie Everett and Mark Bird, the organizers, they did a fantastic job. They gave a lot of money back to advocacy, of which I call activism. I blew my gasket when I told them I'm not an advocate anymore. I'm an activist, and I don't have to repeat what an advocate is over an activist. I think everybody knows. But if they don't know, just know that I believe that this war in vaping is going to be won in the court of public opinion and not in the court of law.
Right.
I think an activist has to be aggressively seeking and pushing for social and political change, where advocates are just merely supporting something for other people who don't have the right to do it, blah, 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 blah. So that's the difference.
Do you think that the vapors, because they were smokers for so long and were shamed, that they're afraid to speak as vapors?
Yeah, I think it's getting better. I mean, the advocacy portion of this show was certainly a hell of a lot better than the advocacy portion we had in Mobile, Alabama, or in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And we'll probably not do it as well in Richmond, which is coming up in August. And that's not an indictment against the NVE. I mean, because they put on a good show, and they do a lot of business to business, and they also bring a lot of character and a lot of class to the organizations who show up, because they don't allow, childlike labeling. They don't allow, a product infringement. They don't allow a bunch of crap.
Yep.
But to answer your question, I think vapors who were smokers once have been dogs so long that they are just willing to accept the fact that they bit the bullet. They're not going to beg other people and do to other people what people did to them.
Right.
So I think a vapor who knows what he or she has done to enhance their life, they're pretty good with their mouth and their computer at 3:00 in the morning, stalking on the keyboard. But to actually get up there and try to defend your right to live longer, that's the sad part of the vaping industry, that we have to defend as vapors, especially you and Russ, who's also a part of the program, Steve, who's aware of what we're doing. It took Steve, and correct me if I'm wrong, buddy, but it took you about 4 months to figure out what the hell it is we were trying to do with people's lives. Am I right?
I think it caught on pretty quickly. Getting a full grasp of the industry, and which I can't even pretend like I have yet, and trying to understand everything that you're doing and going through at these conventions and stuff. And you mentioned that the battle is going to be won in the court of public opinion, and to tie that into exactly what Kevin was asking, I think there's kind of a double-edged sword in play. I think a lot of people are so happy to quit smoking and find something that works better for them. But I think their concern is there's also a culture side of it that you don't necessarily identify with, and our target audience probably doesn't identify with, meaning people who just smoke and want to alternative to smoking. There's also the very cloud chasery, much more youthful side to it that can be off-putting to people. So when you talk about the battle being won in public opinion, I think the people who want to quit sometimes look at that side of things and realize it's not for them, and then are afraid to have the conversations about it in fear of being associated with that. And I think you got your message, and a lot of people you're close to, your circle of people in the vaping industry, have done a lot to overcome that. But I think if that ties into exactly what Kevin was asking, I think that's kind of where you were going with it. I think that's definitely a big factor.
Yeah, I mean, when Kevin, who's middle-aged, pretty much.
Hey.
Okay, I'm older. Well, you're not as young as Steve. Okay?
I'm 26, so I'm pretty ingrained in people I'm friends with, people I work with. I work in retail as my day job, and I'd say a good 40% of the people I work with vape or smoke, at least. I don't really pay attention to the smokers so much, but the people with vapes, you see them, playing with their mods on their lunch break, stuff like that. So even if I don't actively see them doing that, and I mean, regular smoking is so ingrained in our culture that I probably just don't even absorb the fact that they're doing it most of the time.
Things are changing, and as I said last week, I believe you could probably repeat it, there's 3 stages to truth. The first one, it's ridiculed. The second stage, it's violently opposed, as we have been hearing in the last 3 or 4 years. And then thirdly, it's finally accepted and proven as factual and self-evident, and then somebody else takes the credit for it. Right. Ergo, Big Tobacco wanting to take over the vaping community, and we're handing it to them on a silver platter because of all the crap that's happening that we are not able to put on the scoreboard as a win for advocacy, a win for lobbyists, a win for SFATA, CASA, VTA, AVA, not blowing smoke, in every state organization, there's smoke-free associations in every state. So I think we're just spread too thin and we're not singing from the same song sheet. And then people like me and people like Demetrius and people like Phil Basardo and people like Greg Connolly, who's superb knowledge. He needs help in getting the information out there. He just got back from the Global Forum on Nicotine. A lot of people that we know in the vaping community went over there to Warsaw, Poland. I did not go. I don't care to go. There's nothing that I can offer as the former Winston man, because the nicotine gurus, the nicotine experts, the scientists, the researchers, all the statisticians have already got all this bullshit information, because we're still talking about the fact, Kevin and Steve, that nicotine isn't the killer. Right. Nicotine is not the problem here, guy.
It's not.
I don't know what else to say here without sounding like some sort of conspiratorial whack job. I mean, It's not the nicotine. And
but wait, there's good news in Ned Sharpless from the National Cancer Institute.
Yeah,
taking it out of context, but he said both good news for treating cancer and preventing cancer on nicotine levels in combustible tobacco.
Right.
Now that was March, and it was pissed me off when I saw it, and I had the blog in my head for 2 months, and I finally let it out yesterday or day before.
Right.
But that's
good news. Yeah, that's good news. But unfortunately, we have all these mantras that everybody's talking about, and I'm so sick and tired of going on the radio at Vape Radio, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just sick and tired of saying the same shit, different day. It's like Groundhog Day, same shit, different day. Tomorrow there'll be something else that's going to distract us and get us away from the fact that people like me, who have had 30 some years experience in tobacco, and I don't care if you like me or not, and I don't care if you agree with me or not, you can't take away the fact that I know exactly what these companies are capable of doing, and now they're all in cahoots, and I work for them, and that's where I become a different hook. That's where I become a different educator. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got nostrils. Everybody's got different bodily orifices, okay? We all got them. But the difference between me and what everybody else is talking about is I lived it, and no one can take that away. So I think we need to capitalize on that as a podcast, as an education source, to get this information out there. We have to have recognition of vaping as a legitimate industry. It is definitely a legitimate industry. It needs to be separated from tobacco legislation. That is not a big problem. Why should that be a problem? It's not a bicycle. It's not a car. Okay.
No, it's not.
And so if you're going to say vaping is a tobacco product when there's absolutely no tobacco in there, and we just keep giving these free passes to these bad politicians, continuously making bad laws. And then you see what we heard last week when we talked about just briefly that, a lot of these states are having to pay back $5 billion in bonds that they bought when they got the big master settlement agreement back in 1998. And now they have to pay these bills back, and they don't have it. Of course, they're going to raise the taxes on a product that is now affecting, the smokers who've been paying it. When they prioritized and they securitized all of the money that was going into each state based on their per capita, not number of smokers, but how many people that were in that state, they got a proportionate amount of money from big tobacco that was conducive with the medical payments that the state was paying in Medicare and Medicaid. So they securitized all of this money over the next 25 years, in the first 5-7 years in bonds. Okay. And now they're coming due and there's no money left because the money's not coming in the way it did in 1998. Right.
They never expected this.
If we're not going to take ourselves seriously with the idiots that we have out there in the vaping industry, the ones who are infringing upon, product infringement, or if they're putting childlike labels on there, then shame on us. And if we can't self-regulate and get our own house in order, then we have no right expecting Gottlieb, who's under pressure. And I'm not a fan of Gottlieb. Don't start on me. I don't want the listeners to think that I'm just this big fan. No, not at all. But I do know that the pressure's on to get the public awareness up to a point where vaping is a safer and a better alternative, even though not 100% safe. So I just wanted to talk tonight about, the mantras that we all have to have. We have to have open discussion on the complex issues that nobody wants to really talk about. You go to these forums like the Global Forum on Nicotine. That's probably the only forum, Kevin and Steve, where they allow vapors to come in and express their opinion. Every other program that's out there where they're voting, they don't talk to the vapors. They don't talk to the smokers. They just talk to the people within their board who has a voting power to ban it because they've already been influenced with all of the contributions and lies and the misinformation that's been passed by a media that needs to be shut down.
In fact, your pal in Australia, Mr. Chapman, has been invited, and I'm assuming he just denied it or didn't even respond. But he's been invited to that at least once that I know of.
Oh, no, Simon Chapman. And these are the people that used to be my friends. And we didn't stay in touch. We're not buddies. We didn't do barbecues. He took me out for a noodle dinner one time in Australia. So, but I did do a tour with him because they were trying to get tobacco out of the schools for teens, which I'm always for. I'm always been for that. So don't tell me that I get involved in the vaping till I'm trying to have vaping as a gateway for teens. That's bullshit. And I'll take anybody to task on that one. But Simon Chapman has made a career. He's made a career out of being this antagonistic, pitchfork wielding, tiki torch, throwing spear, at people who are threatening his fiscal, end all and be all at the trough. So with these things in mind, I have got to get people to understand that this program is not about vaping. This is not about smoking. No. This is about what's happening to discourage those who want to do it all by themselves. The 10 million vapors we have, Kevin, you didn't need a grant to go get a vape device. You didn't need to have counseling. You didn't have to have somebody support you and give you page after page after page of documents to sign as a non-disclosure. No, you did it for yourself, by yourself, for yourself, and you benefited from it. That's all it is. Yep. And this program and Demetrius's program and Smoke Free Radio and Mike Peterson's show and all the other shows on Vape Radio, which, yes, Vape Radio is for shits and giggles. It's for fun. It's to listen to music. It's to listen to, the generation that they are going after, but they've allowed me to have a segment or two every week so I can get our message out on that particular line of defense too. But again, it's the choir, and I don't mind talking to the choir. I'm not preaching to them. I'm just talking to them because every one of those vapors that listens to Vape Radio may have somebody in their family like you do, Kevin and Steve, who they want to get educated, but they don't have the knowledge or the time to do what you and I and Steve can do, and Russ can do, and Kristen can do, and Pinnacle can do, and VapesGoneWild can do. So we have an opportunity that is so solid, that is so genuine, that is so pure of heart, because we're not making any money. Nope. We don't have sponsors yet. We'd like to have some sponsors that would come in and, pay us every month to give them a shout out so they can see that they're connected with a group of people who have balls enough to say what needs to be said. So I think that's where I'm coming, in our fourth episode tonight, and having you guys with me. And we're now set up, with remote, and we can look like we know what we're doing. Steve, you're at your house. You control the monitors. I have a microphone. You have a microphone. Kevin, you have a monitor. Yep. And we can add to this guests, and we can come in and we can start educating. But we're not going to argue. This is not going to be a show where we're going to bring people in who will just lie. And we'll have information that might be, questioning our abilities to answer questions, and with the information that you've collected in vaping news. I'm not looking to censor it, but I'm not going to make this a pissing contest for the educators who have lied and will continue to lie to be heard, because they've had their time in the sun. They have had their opportunity, and they did a piss poor job, in telling the truth. They have no relationship with integrity as far as I'm concerned. So this podcast is going to be based on integrity. And if we're wrong, call us out. We'll check the information. If we're wrong, Kevin, you will apologize for me, or I'll apologize for myself. Kevin will even go to jail for me. He's already told you've been wrong.
I have been wrong once.
Yeah. You know anything I've been wrong about?
There's a couple people that are on Twitter that keep me straight. Anne is no longer with us.
Who?
and Agent Anya.
Okay.
She kept me straighter than anybody. Jim McDonald, he will
I
talk
love
to
Jim.
me
We
on
talked
occasion.
about that last week.
And somebody we talked about last week, John Summers, he'll check me when I need it. You know,
you know what? We need to be checked. I've made mistakes. Steve, have you ever made a mistake in your life in your 26 years?
Never.
Never.
I was just reading Jim McDonald's articles too. Just catching up.
Jim
you guys probably talked about it last time, but I was just reading his article about the CDC survey about juuling.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
Outstanding. Unbelievable.
Yeah, he's very good. And I've also Oliver Kershaw, who did an excellent piece on that. But with all that being said, there's so many experts out there, and they're not experts because they got a PhD or they have a doctorate or they have medical license. You know, when you have that kind of information available, just like Roswell Park Cancer Institute, of which I worked for 7, 8, 9 years, you know, going up into the Erie County area.
Yeah.
You know, when teens were smoking and I was trying to get them to never start. And if they did, we could get them to quit. You know, even Roswell Park Cancer Institute, you won't hear about it a lot. You know, the doctor there definitely said that vaping is so much more beneficial than smoking combustible tobacco.
Yeah.
Then you got the Royal College of Physicians in the United Kingdom, and you got even American Cancer Society. You talked about that, I think, last week, didn't you?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yeah.
You know, American Cancer Society is standing by the fact that, yes, vaping is a better alternative. Every day, another doctor, another group of people, another medical community has said, yes, we finally concede that vaping is better, but further research is needed. Absolutely.
That's the thing.
Absolutely.
They're backpedaling, but they're
backpedaling now because of what I said, because we're entering the second and third stage of the truth.
Yep.
Violently opposed. First ridiculed, like we had the first 7 years, violently opposed last year and this year. And now we're finally getting to the point where it's going to be accepted and proven to be self-evident and factual. And somebody else will take the credit for it. And that's what pisses me off, because we have not minded our P's and Q's. We haven't dotted all our I's and crossed our T's. We didn't put money into public relations. We allowed the lying media, the lying senators and Congress people, especially on the Democratic side. No, Republicans aren't lily white either, so don't go there. But I'm saying it all started with Chuck Schumer, started with Dickie Durbin and Dickie Blumenthal and several other people. And these people have been given a free pass. They've been allowed to get away with their lies, and no one's ever called them on it but me.
And
but you know what?
There's no repercussions. They can do it all day long.
No, there isn't, because if you look at the 40 top companies that our senators and our Congress people are investing in as far as stocks.
Yeah.
The 40, RJ Reynolds, Philip Morris, and Lorillard ranked 21, 22, and 23. That means there's only 20 other companies that these lawmakers who leave office richer than when they went in. Now, what does that tell you? And it doesn't take a giant, a mathematical giant, or a wizard. I'm not a wizard. I barely got out of high school. I don't have a degree in economics like Bonnie Herzog at Wells Fargo. I don't have a degree in anything other than life. And I'm telling you, as I've told everybody in the first, second, and third podcast, and because I think people needed to know a little bit about who I am, because most people haven't seen A Billion Lives.
Right.
Most people haven't seen my story or heard my story. So I backpedal every now and then because I want people to know that I know what the frig I'm talking about. And that's where if 100% of the people saw A Billion Lives, we wouldn't have to do this.
Nope.
But only 2 or 3% of vapors saw it, and that means probably only 0.5% of the non-smoking public saw it. You know, and there's people in my own family that never went to see it because they had no skin in the game. There was no reason for them to go because it's just going to be more of the same.
Yeah.
We have an opinion. They have an opinion. We're right. They're wrong. We tell the truth. They lie, and so on. And the wheels of the bus go round and round and round and round and round. So we are getting a better following. Steve, you could talk more about that. We're getting some people all over the globe that are listening to the podcast.
I'll tell you exactly. Yeah, we're doing better considering we've only been talking on Instagram mostly so far. We're trying to feel ourselves out. We're doing pretty good.
Let's backtrack a little bit. There's a lot to talk about tonight. And I was listening to Rush Limbaugh this week and Mark Levin, and I listened to, Rachel Maddow. I listened to all sides of, the things that are going on in the world. And I'm just over the top with the crap that we've been living on with the immigration thing. And I bring that up only because I don't know that much about it, and I don't find time to really check all the facts out like some of the millennials do. And that's no offense, Steve, because you're in that frame of mind where you've got information available at the tips of your fingers.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Well, yeah, I don't. I send an email to people. I have to call them to see if they got it. So I'm still old school, but I do know for a fact that when I have these things that I can talk about, like the Chattanooga, Tennessee show with Vape Carnival, you got to give these guys kudos. You got to give them applause. They put on a hell of a show. It was a long trip. I had to get involved with the Charlotte airport shutdown on Friday last week when the PSA, and they canceled 400, 500, 600 flights, and you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out. And, I was on a flight, Kevin, and it was a small 60-seater plane. Well, I flew from Philadelphia to Charlotte, and I was going to connect into Chattanooga. And the pilot comes out after sitting there for 2 hours and said, we need 19 volunteers to not get on the plane. Because with all the screw up and all the ground stops and all of the problems they had with traffic control in Charlotte, in and out because of computer glitches, they put too much fuel in the wings of this airplane, and they asked for 19 people to volunteer. Well, nobody did until they went from $300 a seat to $500 to $800 to $1,100 to $1,300 to $1,800 voucher every person who volunteered to give up a seat. $1,800 plus a hotel for the night plus free meal vouchers. So, these are the things that I'm talking about. When we go to these shows, we go to these programs, a lot of money is spent, to get there, and a lot of intensity and a lot of issues and a lot of problems and travel and weather and hurricanes and flood, but we still go. I do because I have to. That's where I got my sea legs. Yeah. That's where people got to know me in these conventions, but I'm not going to go in there and kiss everybody's ass, and let them know that I'm appreciative that I was called in to be a pole dancer for them. If I can't do what I do best, and that is hopefully educate, entertain with information that makes sense and it can be checkable and fact checked. Checkable? That's not a word. That's not a good word.
Good enough.
You know what I mean. Verifiable. And if Steve, you don't verify or fact check me, I know Kevin will. But the point I'm trying to make is we got an hour and a half show. I'd like to do this every day, but we just can't afford to do it. Number one. And number two, people would not listen. Okay. Because it's not enough of a presentation of corruption, because people believe they're corrupt in the government. People believe that the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids is in bed with American Cancer, Lung, and Heart and the CDC.
Yes.
People believe that the pharmaceutical companies and big tobacco are all in cahoots, but we say it. That's okay because we've grown to accept that as status quo. What people don't like is exposing the cover-up. Well, that's when people get... What?
There's another side to it. I mean, all the people who are paying attention whatsoever believe that, but there's so many people that this just isn't even on their radar whatsoever. And they're just as much a part of the problem as they are for the problem, I guess you would say.
Exactly.
So
exactly,
ignorance of the issue is just as bad sometimes, because a nonchalant attitude about it is not helping the situation either.
That brings up a good point, Steve. When I talk about apathy versus empathy, and I talk about people not caring, because you saw the movie A Billion Lives. You went and watched it, right, Steve?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Kevin. Yeah. Kevin, I know, saw because that's where I met him in Milwaukee. Yeah. And I said, and they took it out of context, and I don't really care at this point because I've been able to backtrack. But in the movie, I said they don't know. I said nobody cares, and I take that with a grain of salt, because what I was talking about is the American Cancer, Lung, Heart, CDC. AMA, they don't care. That's who I was talking about, and it just got edited to where I said it in out of context, where it says nobody cares.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't think it was painted in a bad light whatsoever. I can see that it was taken out of context, but a little bit of hyperbole can be useful in that regard, because I think there's plenty of truth to that.
But every time I went to a show, whether it be in Estonia, Russia, or whether it would be in Finland, or whether it be in Norway, or whether it was in Budapest, or whether it was in I got stuck in Turkey. That's another story for another night. But all the countries we went to, when I said that in the movie, nobody cares, somebody invariably in the audience of several hundred people in the audience said, I care. I care because I didn't want them to think that I was just, giving a one size fits all, nobody cares.
I think just someone wanted to shout out. I think they knew what you were going for there.
I hope so. I hope so because I haven't really taken a lot of heat for it, but it's something I felt bad about because it just means that there's a lot of people who have been fighting that I didn't give credit for, even though that wasn't my point. And I'm not saying that as a point of argument right now. I'm just saying to answer what you just said and what Kevin was talking about. There's a lot of people who don't have a knowledge or understanding what it is we're trying to do, because people still look at the smoker as somebody who did something stupid, and now they're an adult, and now they're smoking around their kids, and now they're smoking in private close quarters, and they look like lepers, feeding off of society because they're too stupid to quit, or they're just ignorant, and that's just so wrong on so many levels. And that's the attitude. That's the attitude that my generation and Kevin's generation had to deal with. Your generation has had a different kind of a understanding of tobacco, because from the time you were a little kid in school, people like me were going to your school telling you not to smoke when you were 11, 12, and 13. I didn't have that. Kevin didn't have that. So we have made some progress and we have made some changes, but the problem still is what I said last week. We still have stalled at 20%. And Kevin's going to argue with me because he read something that's 14 or 15%. And I'm going to stand by my theory in that every year when I went to school, I always found it to be over 18, 19, 20, 21, 22%. And we always stall at 20%. So once we stall there at 20%, they find ways to put more money into paid advertising to find a problem with the solution, which would be Juul. Right now, in the last 4 months, Juul's the problem. It's not Juul's not the problem. There's 20 devices just like Juul that these kids are using, if not cheaper ones. Okay, Juul is just the catalyst to picking on the vaping community. That's all it is. And I told you, they're the patsy, but they're also a very wealthy patsy being sold for $500 million in the next few months. And I stand by it. I will not backtrack off of that because I've talked to people who know what they're talking about. They're not ready to admit it, but I'm just telling you as a podcast show host to try to tell the public that this problem is worthy of discussion. And like I said, we have to recognize that vaping is a legitimate industry. We have to separate vaping from tobacco legislation. We have to have open discussions on complex issues involving vaping.
This is complex.
We have to have a chance to be heard. And I think that's probably the biggest one from we need a chance to be heard and listened to. And again, because we're not anecdotes, we have to have the opportunity to personalize our industry and shift the focus on reduced harm and benefits. But we're still not doing that because every day we keep getting knocked down. We keep having to stand up, knock down, stand up. We get tired. It's like me being thrown under the bus with Von Earl when they sold to Blue. Or Phantom Distribution or Imperial Tobacco. Yeah, I've been thrown under the bus so many times it doesn't hurt anymore. And last week in Chattanooga, as a side note, I was hanging out with the people who bought Von Earl.
Yeah.
They're nice people. Yeah. Otis was a nice guy. And Otis, I'm giving you a shout out, because Otis works for Phantom. Phantom is owned by Imperial. They have now taken the Von Earl pod device, which I was their brand face for a while until they sold to Imperial Tobacco and threw me under the bus. Now, I was pissed, but I'm over it. And yes, anything that will help people quit smoking, I'm for. Yeah. And a lot of people think that I'm wrong. We should talk about that, Kevin. I don't even know how you feel about it, to be honest with you, as far as how much credit do we give big tobacco when you're looking at tobacco harm reduction, like I did with Derek Yock and the Foundation for Smoke-Free World, who's getting $1 billion over 12 years to create a foundation, and the money's coming from Philip Morris International. Yeah. Okay. So I could look at it in a bad way. I could say I want nothing to do with them. But on the other side, at the end of the day, isn't our goal to get people to quit smoking? And no matter what we have to do. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that I'm not upset with the fact that Imperial Tobacco owns a vaping pod that I once was a brand ambassador for. But if it's going to get people to quit smoking, isn't that what we want to achieve?
Right. The Juul thing, they're pissing and moaning about it, but they're not looking at it from their I love me wall. They're looking at it wrong. If these things are getting kids to not smoke, there's something there and they're not seeing it, or they don't want to see it. That's all.
They don't want to see it because right now they're taking a lot of heat. They're putting $30 million, I heard, into education to get kids not to use it. But, everybody keeps forgetting the main thrust of what we're talking about here. Kids are kids, no matter what.
Yeah.
If every child, I told you this last week, I said, you raise a child, not to curse around them. You watch your mouth. You don't use bad language. You don't say something that's like, you can't say the word stupid. You got to say silly. You got to be very cautious. Everything has to be, politically correct. You can't say short. You have to say energy efficient. You can't say fat. You have to say calorically challenged. You can't say balding. You have to say follically handicapped.
That's right.
And as these kids get older, you think you got them to where they've been taught by a good role model. And then when they're 11 years old, the kid comes home from school and tells you to go fuck yourself.
Yep.
So now so that kid didn't hear that from me or his mother or his grandparents. He heard it from school.
That's about
kids
the age
kids are very impressionable. And I think, Steve, you correct me if I'm wrong, being from 3 different generations here, which makes this podcast kind of nice. We got 3 different generations being thrown about here. Yeah. But when you went to school, Steve, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of things that you knew were bad, but you tried it anyway because of the peer pressure. Same as my generation. And we just met with our 50-year reunion committee the other night. We're planning a 50-year high school reunion.
Yeah, and I'm only 8 years out of high school at this point. So, growing up, when it comes to those life lessons and stuff like that, I mean, I think my parents instilled in me most of the overarching lessons, but they weren't exactly healthy with their own habits when it comes to mostly alcohol. But my parents, I had a dad that used chewing tobacco, and I had a mom that smoked on and off. Right. Later in life, she has started to. She's quit and restarted a couple times. Has tried vaping a little bit. Actually, got them both using CBD a little bit recently as well. But they were always just kind of honest about it. They had their faults, but when it came to stuff like drugs and smoking, they never encouraged smoking. They didn't really have anything against drinking, but that's just the way they were brought up as well. Right. When it came to smoking, I never had any urge to try it. Non-tobacco related smoking, of course, down the road was a different story, but right. I just never felt any pressure with smoking, but I also grew up in a, I guess you'd say upper middle class area, though my family in particular was not. So other drugs were more of a concern in high school for me. I mean, you're talking everything from marijuana to, like Adderall and that sort of thing,
Well, the point I'm trying to make, Steve, is the fact that, yes, kids have pressure no matter what it is. And it doesn't matter what your drugs of choice are, or, still today we have 11, 12 kids dying every day from texting and driving. And how many more programs or how many more PSAs and how many commercials do you have to have and cars that have been racked up, for kids to get it? Binge drinking is such a big thing right now with lots of kids dying. We got kids doing some pretty stupid things on their skateboards, and
I think the point I was getting to was no matter how well my parents would have done, it was only one shade away from trying whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Right. You're influenced so much by your peers, everything else going on, pressure to be cool. It's every trope you've ever seen in a movie or TV show is 100% true. So it doesn't really matter. And even beyond that, kids go away to college. And then, all bets are off. The number of people I know that were totally, innocent in high school, that changed pretty quickly when you go away to live. Even people that commute to school, but it changes on a dime.
Yeah. Well, that brings you up to a good point of discussion here, because I don't want to carry this on forever. But, when you have the tobacco industry who is now willing to back off and stop targeting the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds like they did with me and Kevin's generation, okay, they have to find other ways to get their income up there. And that is with third world developing of tobacco in third world countries and shipping it over there and exporting it, as well as the new alternative, which is the vaping, e-liquid, e-cigarette, and mod. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. They could have done this 10, 15, 20 years ago if they really wanted to save lives. They really could have. They had the money, they had the technology, they had the wherewithal. They knew what they were doing with Premier cigarettes back in the 90s. It was a lesser combustible use of tobacco. It wasn't burning as hot. It was not as carcinogenic. They could have done it then, but they opted not to because they didn't think that they would ever get caught. And greed is always outweighs fears.
Yep.
So at this point, they have got to find a way to put the pressure on kids who weren't exposed to it like you were as far as tobacco.
Right.
I'm not talking about what you just mentioned, the other Adderall and the other drugs that were out there.
Right.
So I think we can all understand that. But what's frustrating for me is that the big tobacco companies keep selling their tobacco when they are now putting $1 billion into a foundation for a smoke-free world. And I've already discussed this with lots of people like Aaron Biebert, who's doing documentaries for them. And I'm all for it because that's just like I said with Blue, my Blue, which was the old Blue e-cigarette, was a Von Earl. If people are going to quit smoking, you have to give credit where credit is due, and that is if you're going to stand by and say you are involved and you look for tobacco harm reduction, and these people are now using a Blue or a Vuse or a Mark 10, I have to step aside and say, well, hell yeah, I wish they would use something else, but if it's going to keep them off combustible tobacco, I will bow out gracefully and say, go for it. I mean, that's me. And a lot of people in the industry are saying, well, if the tobacco company's involved, and I was one of them, I admit it. If the tobacco company was involved, I don't want to be anywhere near them. But I got to meet these people, Kevin and Steve, this weekend, and they're not bad people. It was a business deal, and I have to step back and say, hey, I would rather kids not do anything. I would rather kids not smoke, not vape, not binge drink, not text and drive, not have premarital unprotected sex, not be bullies, and just go to school. But that's not the world we live in. In an ideal world, that's the way it would be, but we don't live there. So here we go again. Yep. The only thing that a child is held accountable for the rest of his or her life is addiction to nicotine through the marketing and the strategies of $14 billion ads that I was a part of, even way back when you guys were even, gleam in your daddy's eye, except for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
You were my market. You were the ones I was going after. So I think with that in mind, it should take us to another part of our podcast tonight, and that is how we got here. Well, first of all, we know vaping works. We know that there's 9, 10, 11 million people just in the U.S. who are vaping, and some may dual use. I don't care.
Yep.
But every cigarette they don't smoke, they're better off. But
I know plenty of those
here's
people.
What happened.
So. I know plenty of those people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's up to them to quit when they're ready. Right. Just like, and nobody can put a gun to their head and make them quit or make them start. They did it, and at 14, when you had your first cigarette, you knew there was something wrong when you choked and green stuff came out of your nose.
9.
9. Okay.
Yeah.
So we knew that there was something wrong even back then. So, with that being said, now we finally have gotten a product that works about 65 to 70% of the time, unless I've heard wrong, Kevin.
I've got 72 to 76.
72 to 76% successful.
And any standard deviation away from that is still, extremely significant.
Yeah.
Sure. And when you have the statistics of Shantex and Nicorette and Nicoban and Nicotrol and they're down around 9, 10, 11%, if that, we're being gracious.
Of the three together is about 7.
About 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's why the success rate of quitting with big pharmaceuticals drugs is, you 7, 8, 9 times, then you finally say, screw it. I'll go to my grave smoking because it's not working. So here,
the FDA did I don't have it in front of me now. They did a experiment with Chantix with adolescents, and it failed. Think about that.
Yeah.
They wanted to use a dangerous drug to try to get kids to quit smoking, and it failed. I couldn't believe that.
The Shantex was black. It was passed through very quickly. It was fast tracked.
Oh
it got fast tracked with the FDA in a matter of, I think, 7 or 8 months, and they went on the market with big pharmaceutical companies. And the failure was so strong they had to put a black box warning on it because there was I think 1,500 attempted suicides, and then there was maybe, I guess, 350 or 400 actual suicides that were follow through on, and
successful.
People died. They died.
That's the medication, right?
Yep.
Okay. I got it mixed up.
Chantix is what you take, it's kind of like a antibiotic packet where you have to take it for so long and you keep smoking and then you exponentially reduce the amount of nicotine.
But what else was in it that was causing that level of
psychoactive drugs that was causing you to have delusions? And whatever they put in it, it was fast tracked, and it wasn't clinical trials of 5 years like they want everything else to have clinical trials of 5 years. It didn't have that. That's why they had to put the black box warning on it. And then but it's still being sold. Yep. It's still being sold. First you had to get it with a prescription, then eventually
Varenicline is the generic name apparently.
Vericillin.
Okay, I'm pronouncing it terribly wrong because that's. I was not aware of the depression and suicide. You look at a Wikipedia article and it said the second main bullet point. Yeah. And I mean, like any other antidepressant, which is all a guess in the first place. It's add on to the fact something that they fast tracked without proper vetting is just asking for trouble.
Yeah.
But the thing, guys, that caught my attention, having been involved with the tobacco industry since I was 13, 14 years old in one way, shape, or form, people get so desperate to quit when, before a doctor tells you have lung cancer or heart disease, you do make many efforts on your own because you really don't like it. And I've never met a smoker who's glad that he or she started, and nor will an adult start smoking if they never smoked as a teenager or a young adolescent or an adult. So with that being said, people get so desperate they will try anything, and then the media comes out and says, "Hey, well, somebody died of attempted suicide with Chantix." Well, it gets buried. Nobody talks about it because of the power of big tobacco and the power of big pharmaceutical companies.
Now, to speak to that specifically, I have a question. I'm not super familiar. Are they how closely linked? Or this is an education piece for me. Big tobacco and big pharmaceutical, is it two sides of the same coin in that regard when it came to the Chantix and the Nicorette and all that stuff? Or is it just big pharma just wanting their piece of the pie at the time? Okay.
I know in the 90s, late 80s or early 90s, they had a World Health Organization meeting. Pharmaceuticals were there, and it was before the patch, the gum, and all that. I don't think tobacco was actually there, Dave. I don't know if you know that or not.
Well, no, it started out that way. It started out with the fact that, people like me were out there in schools, and American Cancer, Lung, and Heart of people who I worked for back in the late 80s, early 90s after I quit.
Yeah, I was just curious personally because it's not an area of this that I'm particularly educated on.
It's a scary, scary thing. It got promoted so well on television because big pharmaceutical has billion-dollar advertising budget, so they just started running it as the only way to successfully quit smoking. And they'd never used a young person. They always used the old decrepit 60, 70-year-old who now has emphysema and, has a hard time walking around, which is why, I suggest that they also use CBD as a protocol, to help get healthier when they do quit. But that's another story. But anyway, Chantix was a big, big tool for smokers to quit. Unfortunately, it didn't work. It was just an ineffective, expensive, big pharmaceutical ploy, another hoax brought on, and to answer your question, brought on by big tobacco and big pharmaceutical who were in bed together, sleeping together, because tobacco would continue to be sold. People would still continue to try to quit and fail and spend lots of money, with insurance. Come on back. So, and that's it.
We'll be here.
And now we have history repeating ourselves with the exact same thing with the vaping thing, because they now want people to come on back because vaping is just as bad as smoking, and it's just a bunch of lies, a bunch of crap. It's no different than them talking about all the crap that goes on with marijuana, that it's as bad as fentanyl and it's as bad as everything. It's all just a bunch of garbage. So,
well, that's where I get concerned because you talk about, if big tobacco is getting people to quit smoking and pick up their alternatives, that's all well and good, but they're all just steering them back eventually towards cigarettes with all the taxation and all stuff they're trying to do. So that's where I have a hard time drawing the line personally. And obviously I'm not quite as educated as you two, but it's certainly scary. And I think we're going to have harder and harder times trying to draw that line in the sand.
It's government because they want the money. And then it's also pharma and tobacco. They're all playing against each other, but they're having fun. Yeah.
Well, see, that's why nobody wants. Kevin is forever trying to get people to debate me. Kevin is always putting a challenge out to these people to stand up with me. And I may not have the right words all the time, and I may not have the nice, square shoulder pads that Dickie Blumenthal has from the state of Connecticut, and I may not have the academic, PhD after my name, but I have life skills that nobody can take away from me. And I just want to keep reminding them that kids are still kids. You take something, make it look naughty, they're going to want it. You don't show pictures of black lungs to kids when they're in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, because for most kids at that age, the grosser the better. They're not thinking that way. They're not thinking like Scott Gottlieb is now. Scott Gottlieb was no different than any one of us. He was a kid once. He knows the pressures. And what he's doing now is trying to put it's for the children mantra out there, along with Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I'm so sick and tired of hearing it's for the children. It's for the children.
And they're all shooting themselves in the foot, because here's the problem. You can preach this to children and scare them all you want, but with how much dissent there is among the industry, all the kids get to take is one story that supports his side of the argument, and he'll run with it. Yeah. So if nobody can agree, you can preach all your, help the kids all they want. They're going to hear whatever they want to hear. And I mean that you can expand, you can blow that up to anyone's going to hear what they want to hear, but even more so on someone that's so impressionable. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Children in public health do the same exact thing.
Yeah,
that's right. And that's why I don't do shows anymore. I've been asked to do a lot of shows, to wait on the phone for, 45 minutes, to give my comments for 3 minutes on something that's not going to make a big difference at all, because they're not going to agree with me anyway, because they have the power of the off switch, and they know who's paying their bills every week with sponsorship and commercials. So that's why podcasts are really vitally important to me now at this stage of my life, in the fact that, nobody knows what's going on, and we need to bring it to the attention and raise the level of awareness, which brings me to a new story, guys. And the story this week that I'm going to end the podcast on tonight, hopefully won't shock you, because it's happening all over the country. But this is something that's happening to us right here in New Jersey this past week. In New Jersey, they have been pushing since June 21st. They were voting on a 75% tax on e-liquids and hardware. 75%.
Man. Okay.
Now, Pennsylvania's industry got decimated with 40% 2 years ago. Okay. Yep. We lost about 60% of the stores, I think, Kevin, if my memory is correct. And again, you can check me on that. 65% of the stores had to shut down because they couldn't afford a 40% tax. Well, now we get this new governor here, Murphy, and he introduced through their legislation with, I think, Senator Adiago and Assemblyman Greenwald, or Assemblywoman, I don't know what the hell she is, he or she, but they wanted to come up with a 75% tax. Now you got to listen to this whole thing, because it gets better. Okay. 75% tax in New Jersey that would start July 1st. That's only 2 weeks away when they started it. And it's Bill A4132 and S2731, I believe, which was an extra tax on e-liquids. And it was voted out of the committee, and then it went to the floor. So what happened at A4132, they did amend it a little bit to where they were going to change it to a 90-day enactment after it was to become effective, which means they got a 90-day grace period where they want to go back and they want to look at the other bill, S2731, which is the per milliliter tax, which would be the other option. Instead of the 75% tax, they would look for a 20 cent per milliliter tax. So if you have a 30 milliliter bottle, okay, and you're going to get charged an extra $6 tax on a bottle that costs you 12, okay?
Tobacco tax.
So tobacco tax, yes. Tobacco. And there's no tobacco in it. So Correct. What they are now saying that they might drop it to 10 cents per milliliter, okay?
But there's two different versions. One of them was a 10 cent, but yeah.
Yeah, one's a 10 cent, and that's look like where they're going to go. And then on top of that, guys, they still want to have a floor tax, which would be due on the first day of every month of, 10, 20%. So these are the things that are happening here in New Jersey. But here's the kicker. There's an organization in New Jersey. It's the New Jersey Vaping Retail Coalition, NJVRC. And they had this lobbyist for 2 years. I was on the board for about 13 minutes.
Uh-oh.
They asked me to be on the board a couple of years ago. I guess it'll be 3 years in July. And this is just a quick sideline because you got to understand what I go through every day. This is not just shits and giggles. I'm not sitting here making buttons. I'm
afraid to hear what you're going to tell me.
Well, 3 years ago, there was a New Jersey Expo, the Great New Jersey Expo, where they opened up. Yeah. They opened up the expo, and 250 vendors came in from all over the country. And the night everybody's setting up, Senator Joe Vitale comes in and says, "You cannot vape in the convention." Now you forget you're going to a vape convention, okay, and you're not allowed to vape inside. You have to go outside next to the dumpsters and vape.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, needless to say, I was there. And I was asked by the promoter to come up there and do some advocacy. So I was there on Friday. And at the same time, the week before, I had met the two lobbyists and the attorney, I guess, for the NJVRC, New Jersey Vaping Retailers Coalition. So they asked me if I'd be interested in being on their board. So I went up to North Jersey, had pizza with them and had a beer with them. And we talked about it. They asked me to be on the board. I said yes. I went to their first meeting and I walked out, along with a couple other people whose names I won't mention because I don't have their permission to talk about them yet. But they happen to own vape shops in New Jersey. And they, of course, were very concerned about all the deeming regs that were being talked about back 3 years ago. The show it went on, but, people were getting fined for vaping inside and people were packing up. And it was just a real nightmare. It was just a real fiasco. But the two guys that were running the NJVRC, and there's no love lost for us, so I can mention the group because right now they're not even legal. They didn't file the right forms. And this last week, my good buddy, who was doing everything for the state of New Jersey, his name is Mark Anton. Kevin, you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
He was asked to step aside from the NJVRC because he took the executive directorship of SFATA, which is the state chapters, like state, Smoking Federation, Foundation for Alternative Trade Association. So every state has a chapter where SFATA can come in and act as a legislative body for you to help get information to fight your state's legislative, corruption. So that's kind of like, but then states started to do their own thing, like the Georgia State Smoke Free Association and the Kentucky and Tennessee and Florida and, Pennsylvania,
Ohio.
Lots of states. Yeah. And Ohio. So a lot of people have their own state organization, but SFATA was the one who pretty much started it. But my point is, here you have a problem with vaping in this country that's so huge federally. Okay. And now we can't get these states to have a win on their column. Okay, with all the money we're spending for lobbyists and all the money we're spending for attorneys, which is why I'm saying, and I've asked people to please put a couple bucks into public relations because this is going to be won in the court of public opinion. Right. I don't care what anybody's. Kevin, you want to argue with me till the cows come home? I don't think you will. Nope. But I'm not saying lobbying is not important. Of course it is. But we got to do more than just lobbying and putting money into the pockets of these attorneys and lobbyists to go in there and try to convince a legislator who's been paid by big tobacco and big pharmaceuticals for the last 20 years, making them rich, that they're going to now turn and do a 180 and say, no, I was wrong. Let's waffle. No, it's not going to happen that way. So that's what I'm going to continue to fight for, Kevin and Steve. And that's what I need your support on. And I think I've got it. But I just need your guidance and your direction on how to best get that message out, because our podcast is going to have to talk about information like this, which is not for the faint of heart, because we got stores that are paying New Jersey Vaping Retailers Coalition every month
to get screwed.
And they're not getting any wins.
To get screwed.
And where are they saying the money's going?
The money is supposed to go to the association, which is supposed to lobby to keep the bills and the taxes down. Well, they've been doing it for 3 years that I know of, and I was on the board for, like I said, 13 minutes before I walked out, and never been back. But I've been hearing through my friends, Mark Anton, who is the executive director, who was asked this last week to step aside from the New Jersey Vaping Retail. He lives in the state, and he's been the main man for the state of New Jersey. He was going to have a 500-person rally this last Thursday, and they asked him to step aside because it was not conducive to what they were trying to do with their new lobbying efforts, which is pretty corrupt right now. So I say that.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's to a point where there's no transparency. You ask for questions, and a good friend of mine is now the president of the NJVRC. I don't think he knows what he's getting into, and I keep getting all these memos that are flying through my computer showing me what's been going on for 2 or 3 years, like I'm going to be able to do something. Yeah. The only thing I can do, guys, is have you, Kevin, check all this stuff when you have time.
Yep.
Steve, you have to be available to make sure that I can broadcast it without being shut down, to where maybe somebody in New Jersey will say, what the hell, man, what's going on? And then these stores can come up with a chapter that's going to be beneficial to the state and to the stores who've been paying for 3 years and getting no wins on the scoreboard. So that's what we're talking about, guys. That's what the podcast, the David G. Model Citizen Program, is going to be. And I'm just grateful that you guys are here. But every week we can talk about this, and every week we can try to find ways to, raise the consciousness of people, to get people on the podcast to say, hey, this is what happened. This is not what happened. Because right now, all I'm hearing is news that I have fact checked, and I have found out right from the horse's mouth that this kind of shit is going on right here in my own backyard. And I've been in vaping since 2007. And this is just a big slap in the face. I just think, to bring this show to a close for tonight, because I'm starting to get angry, and when I get angry, that's not good. Because I'm poking the bear myself. And
I'll poke you.
I know, but I don't. I just want to make sure that when we do these shows, and the people understand that we're bringing the truth, whether we like the way it's coming out or not, it's still a fact. The truth is the truth. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, guys.
The tax thing. There's a couple people on Twitter that nobody cares about. The nobody cares thing comes up a little bit here and there. The tax should be no tax, period, on anything, no matter what. You mentioned earlier, Pennsylvania. Chris Hughes lost his shop. I'm going to go with at least 50% of the shops were closed because of what was that? Right. That was 90%, I think.
Okay.
I'm looking at his statement right now. To be clear, the tax going forward will only apply to e-liquid, complete kits that contain heating element and e-liquid in a single package. And he's asking how are they going to get their money back that they've been paying so far all along. I've been saying, even to Greg Conley and the others, there should be no tax. It's not tobacco. Right. You guys are focusing on the wrong shit. Cut it out.
Right.
They're conceding. Oh, well, we're going to give you 90%. Okay, well, now it's 40. Okay, thanks. Right. No, that's not acceptable.
Who was the one that fought that? What vape industry did that out there in Pennsylvania?
PA, I'm not sure offhand. Kingdom Vapor, I think.
Kingdom Vapor, that's right. And they fought it for over 2 years. They fought it for 2 years, and it looks like they're a little victorious on certain things, but it's still not enough because,
it's a loss. It's a loss.
Too little, too late. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube. People lost their money, their shirt. So we need to stop that. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let it happen in New Jersey, where I've raised my kids and I pay taxes, $8,000 a year taxes, and then to have this governor come in and say he wants $1.5 billion tax increase. And if we have to get 22 million or 14 million or 12 million from the vapors, we're going to get it by hook or crook.
It's a bummer because I feel like he's using it as a smoke. He's using the marijuana as a smoke screen in this regard.
Yes, he is. Absolutely.
Because as much as my generation and everyone's all gung ho about that, and me personally, I am, and I was very much a fan of him coming in almost purely based on that decision. But the more I've been educated on this matter, just makes it feel like it's just an excuse, using that as a smokescreen to squeeze more money out of the people who are not being spoken for. Because marijuana is the hot button issue.
You guys are.
That's why this program, guys, is really important to me. It's going to be a passionate show for me, and every week it's unfortunately going to be more crap that we have to talk about and discuss on the air. But if you're listening out there and you want more information on things that we're talking about, or you need us to spend more time every week on a specific subject that's of interest to people that and love and care about, that may be just interested enough to say, hey, it's time to pull the trigger here and make an effort to try to get my life back, and by vaping or whatever tools you need. If you want to quit cold turkey, if you want to vape, if you want to use Shantex, whatever it takes for you to quit smoking is what this program is about. And we're not going to beg you. We're just going to educate you. We'll give you information and links to things, but please make sure that you link into Kevin Crowley's blog, Vaping News. What is it, Kevin? Say it again.
Vaping News blog. Vapinglinks.blog.
vapinglinks.blog.
Yep.
And of course, my podcast is davidgmodelcitizen.com. Steve is always available to make sure that I'm technologically advanced and aware of what's happening in the cyber world. Russ Daly is out there helping me with my marketing so we can find distributors and we can find sponsors and we can find people who want to share in our excitement and educating people so we can, keep the show going in Canada and in Europe and wherever vaping is prevalent and an alternative to quitting smoking product that contains 4,700 chemicals, gases, and poisons. So that's our show for tonight. Kevin, you have anything else you want to say?
Nope. I'm good.
Before we head out? Steve, how about you?
Thanks,
You glad you joined us?
Yeah, it's a good time. Glad I could be part of the conversation. I'm always just kind of hiding in the background. To those who want to get a hold of us, you can check us out at there's a contact form on davidgmodelcitizen.com. I know we've been relying pretty heavily on Instagram because that's where Dave had kind of a big following going into this. So always feel free to comment on anything really, but any of the episode announcement posts, I usually put them up on Dave's Instagram. We'll get Twitter and everything rolling out here in a little bit. Just got to reel in all of Dave's random accounts he's created over the years. And
yeah. Well, I'm random, that's for sure.
And I know, Kevin, what's your Twitter handle?
Vaping it.
Vaping it, gotcha. And I think you're similar on Instagram. I think I started tagging you in our post very recently.
As soon as I can figure out how to use it, I will.
Well, we're learning as you learn.
I noticed you followed. You guys are usually hearing me give a big shout out to Pinnacle and VapesGoneWild and the little ads we've had. I would say just real quickly, since I introduced to the show this time, I was not really aware of a lot of this stuff coming into working with Dave, and when it comes to vaping and CBD, I've learned a lot recently, and I can't be more thankful to the partnership with Pinnacle CBD and what they've been able to open my eyes to through Dave. Some really cool stuff.
Well, I feel the same way. Kevin's always been. Kevin and I have been talking about doing something for a couple of years, and it's finally now coming to fruition. And I couldn't be more pleased with the group that I've decided to work with and work with me. And we're going to get this rolling. We're going to get this out there. And if we can do this a couple times a week, and if you like what you heard, let us know. If you don't like it, you want to criticize, we can handle that too. We're all big boys. So
bring it on. Yep.
Bring it on, and we'll give you all the information necessary to make qualified decisions to help the people in your family that you love and care about, if and when they're ready. So with that, folks, good night. See you next week. And again, stay in touch and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Have a great night.